welcome to this first installment of our KPPM conversations. For those of you who don't know what KPPM stands for, it stands for Kanban Project, Program and Portfolio Management. And yes, I know it's 3 Ps, but that is the project management community to blame for. They call their project, program and portfolio management just PPM. And what we are specifically interested in here at Zuviate is multi-project management. But what we're today going to look at is WIP limits at project level. And we by design called this the elephant in the room, but more about that later. We are planning this to be a series of panel discussions. We'll do, let's say, about every 2 to 3 months one. And we would like you to become part of this. So in the feedback form at the end, we'll ask you to suggest topics, talk to us about your biggest challenges so that we can bring more panelists in and can have discussions about this. A bit of housekeeping, first of all. We will allow chat, as you can see, and we'll also have a Q&A. You should see at the bottom there a section that says Q&A. Feel free to post your questions as we go along, and we'll try to bring them into the chat. If you would have liked to have them answered, you can also feel free to keep on chatting. I'll try to also keep an eye on that, but definitely if you want a question to be answered, please put it in the Q&A. Another thing, we are also parallel to this running or not totally parallel, but on Thursday, we are running a German session of this with the same topic at the same time, but with different panelists. And in German, as I said, those of you in the audience who also do speak German, feel free to attend that one as well. You will also see we are also recording this session, and we'll do the same with the Thursday one, and we will make that available afterwards. But let me stop talking and just say, first of all, a special welcome to our panelists, Johan and Ramon. Can I maybe ask you to, in, let's say, less than a minute, introduce yourself and maybe tell us also in a few sentences about your experience with Kanban. Johan, I don't know if you want to start us off there.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Johan Pretorius. It's a pleasure to join you today. I'm the founder and CEO of Octa Agile Consulting. It's a dynamic South African firm. And our primary goal is to improve business performance and throughput for the organization. I've been involved with the Kanban methodology for around 6 years and come to realize that it is probably one of the world's best kept secrets. If applied correctly, it proves to be a tremendous business value. And I'm excited about today's discussions and hoping that we can unlock some secrets and some value for you.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Johan. And now, Ramon.
Yes, I'm Ramon. I work in a company doing a power electronic device, working in a team of engineers. Our main activity are on the engineering, so designing products, producing products, maintaining products. We start our journey in the Kanban 2.5 years ago, after we decided that the previous methodology based on the waterfall Gantt chart was not sticking to our way of working. And now I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Yeah, most of you will know Mark and myself, but just to summarize, I mean, Mark and I have been working together now for about 30 years. First, we had an IT company and built that up in South Africa. But since 2010, we worked into the digital transformation and via the theory of constraints, then in the end led us to finding Kanban. These days, we are helping companies move towards more effective project delivery using Kanban and Kanbanize. Mark, maybe you want to add a few words there as well, but I can also then hand over to you to start us off.
Yeah, thank you, Matthias, and very warm welcome also from my side to everybody. We have been teaching Kanban to business leaders for many, many years. And applying WIP limits, so restricting the amount of work that we have at team level, is generally well understood. It's still difficult, but generally people want to do this. They understand the reasons for it, and they go ahead and figure out how to do that over time. Unfortunately, the same is not true for limiting work in progress at project level. And this is something that we've been battling with as consultants for many years. There's just so many reasons why it's not easy to implement. And we want to use this opportunity today to actually have a discussion about this topic, and perhaps also from the audience, figure out what are all the different reasons. Why is it so difficult to do what we know how to do at team level, at project level? So we want to use that collective wisdom of everybody here to try and see whether we can not only understand the consequences of not limiting work in progress at project level, but also talk about the reasons why this might not be so easy, and perhaps in the end also find some action points that we all can take away. So I will kick off with a short simulation kindly made available by the European Software Institute, Centre Eastern Europe. That's a mouthful, so we call them EZC. They've built the simulation, and it's built on our favorite Kanban tool called Kanbanize. I would love to talk more about Kanbanize, but that is not the purpose of today's session. So the simulation is sort of the starting point. I'm going to go through. It's something that most of us have seen. I've seen in some sort of variant, perhaps in Excel, and it's usually quite instructive to go through. Here we have in Kanbanize, and we're going to use that then to guide in the rest of today's discussions. So we have a relatively simple Kanbanize board, and we can see on this one workflow we have projects, and you can all see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
Good. So we have the projects, and we have 3 projects that we need to complete. Each of those projects going to go through 3 different phases: a planning phase, implementation phase, and a finalize until it's done in typical Kanban fashion. So moving from the left of the board to the right of the board until it's finished. Every project the organization completes is going to either generate 20,000 and put in whatever unit you like, euros, dollars, rand, whatever. Or perhaps rand, you have to multiply by 20 to get to a reasonable amount. It's going to generate 20,000 euros per month, either in terms of new revenue or because of cost savings. So these are business projects, not just an internal project that you need to complete. It's a business project. It's going to generate some sort of upside for the organization. All of these 3 projects are executed or done by one team. One team in the organization is going to do all those 3 projects. And this team, we don't know how many people actually work in that team, but it has a cost to the organization of 15,000 euros, dollars, whatever. And each of those projects is broken down into 3 phases, corresponding with the project execution phase here at the top. So we have a planning phase for the yellow project. In fact, let me just quickly filter on the yellow project. So planning phase for the yellow project, we have an implementation phase for the yellow project, and we have a finalizing phase until it gets done. So this is at the team level. Now, we want to go through 2 scenarios, and to simplify it, we are going to assume that the team can complete 1 phase of a project per month. So when we're looking at all the phases that are there for all the projects, so there are 9 phases, and if they can complete 1 phase per month, it's going to take 9 months to complete. Now that's the starting point. So very simple, a phase a month. Now, in addition, we're going to have 2 different scenarios, and we call them scenario 1 and 2. The first scenario, that is an ambitious team. It's a team who believes that in order to show progress, we have to run in parallel. So this team is going to, when starting, is going to start the planning phase for project yellow, this orange and red at the same time. Whereas the second team, this is a more conservative team. but the team that is more focused on finishing is going to limit the project progress to one project in any of these orange phases at a time. So this team, this simulation, the scenario, is going to focus on trying to finish a complete project before starting the next one. And we have this from a team point of view, we have the same number of project phases down here at the bottom. Essentially, we are running these two scenarios at the same time. So scenario one, the ambitious parallel. And when we're just looking at the scenario one, we see this. Whereas if we go to scenario two, let me do this part. Then we see that scenario two has projects 4, 5, and 6, which are equivalent to projects 1, 2, and 3. And then we're going to compare what happens in scenario 1 to scenario 2. That is the context, and I'm going to show all of these scenarios. So right at the top, we have a last lane, which is a simulation lane. This we're going to just control which month we're going to work in. So let me move that to months finish, and you'll see that some things just happen automatically. This is because we are using, for this simulation, we're using Kanbanizer's business rules to automate quite a lot of the work that happens in the background. So this makes us easy to actually see what's happening. So I've now started with month 1. And in month 1, and that is where we all just need to quickly pay attention to just understand the mechanics. So in the ambitious parallel execution scenario, so scenario 1, the team has started working on the planning phase of 3 projects. They pulled these 3 projects in, and simultaneously we saw that these projects actually went into the planning phase. So now I'm planning. In scenario 2, where we have a focus on only one project at a time, this team started working on the blue project, the planning phase. That's month 1. Then I go to month 2. Okay. So for month 2, nothing has changed with this team. So if we just quickly think about it, we've said that it takes the team 1 month to complete a phase. Since they're multitasking 3 phases at the same time, obviously they're only going to be able to complete 1/3 of the work on a phase in a month, which means you're not going to see anything from month 1 to month 2. In the WIP limit 1 scenario, so scenario 2, we see that the first phase has been completed. Okay. Now, what do you expect is going to happen in the next phase? Let's just quickly see whether we can figure out the mechanics behind this. So if I now pull this month 2 to month 3, what is going to happen on this board? Johan, you're smiling.
Yeah, I don't know if I should answer.
Well, any of you.
Yeah, you're the only one that can say much. Our listeners can't say much.
Well, basically, for the top part of it, the phase is still going to stay the same. And obviously, phase 4.2 for the second part of it's complete, and they're going to start on the third phase.
Okay, let's do this. So we go to month 3. Yes, phase 4.2 completed. They started on the third one. Nothing happened in the other one, whereas this project now moved to finalize. So what's going to happen when I pull the next month, or when I complete the next month?
You're going to make money on the first project.
Okay, so your expectation is project 4 is going to complete because we are going to finalize the project. What is going to happen in scenario 1? The ambitious parallel execution.
3 tasks will be completed.
So these 3, we expect them to be completed, and these 3 to move into implement. Okay, let's do this. Check our logic. Okay, 1, 2, 3 completed. The new ones were pulled in, and the projects all moved to implement. And in this case, the blue case, the project was completed, and it started working on the purple one. So what will happen now? Let me ask the question differently. After how many more iterations? So what month is the next project going to complete for the scenario 2?
I mean, you've got
It's
the
simple.
3
It's
months, so
a simple logic, Johan. You can you can just blurt it out. It's so obvious.
Right, in month 6.
Month 6 or month 7, actually.
Month 7, yeah. So month 7, when month
Beginning of
7
month
starts,
7,
you're
end
going
of month
to
6.
invoice your second project.
Yes. So somewhere in month 7. So after how many months are we going to complete all 3 projects in the scenario 2? So in what month? What is going to be the counter at the top?
10.
10.
10.
And in the first case, the first scenario?
10.
Okay, so expectation is both of those scenarios are going to complete all the projects by month 10. Okay, so the first milestone is month 7, where we have 2 projects completed. Let's see whether that is in the scenario 2. Okay, so the project moves. Project 5 moves to finalize. We have them to finalize there, and now project 5 is going to complete. We have month 7. All of them move over to finalize. And now we're starting with the last iteration. Okay, so month 8, month 9. And now for the final Big Bang, all projects are completed.
Yeah, so the big question is now, what is the difference? Because we were finished.
So all projects completed of the same amount of time. Your thoughts about this?
So Mark, obviously with the second method, you started delivering value a lot quicker. And obviously you started generating income for the business a lot quicker. And obviously the customer 4.1 for phase 4.1 or project 4, he got his project completed on the first 3 months. And then obviously 5 second, and then 6 was the last one that waited actually 10 months to get it done. So you're delivering value a lot quicker, you're generating income a lot quicker.
So we can see that Johan has a lot of experience with Kanban. He immediately jumps right through to the crux of the matter. Now, before we actually go that far, let's first think a little bit about the individual projects. So all of them completing at the same time. Is that realistic? And when we now start engaging, and so if you have any questions from the audience, if there's anything that you want to add, just put it into the chat. Matthias is going to keep an eye on that. So we are going to talk happily on for the remainder of this hour, but you can actually add your questions, your insights in the chat. So my first question, is it realistic? So if you would now translate this, and of course you have vast amounts of experience. So we want to bring the theory now, and the theory is obvious. I mean, we've seen these kinds of simulations so many times in many different guises, and we're going to now try and unpack this a little bit and then try to get to the meat of why don't people just follow the advice that we see here. So is it realistic? So we have the scenario where we're multitasking, where we're doing all the projects at the same time. We have the scenario where it's only one project at a time, and they all complete after 10 months.
Not really realistic. One thing is also to consider that you simplify things. You didn't consider the time for context switching. The assumption is that if you're juggling 3 activities in the team at the same time, there is no overhead of context switching in this simulation. In the reality, you will have the context switching. Also, you will have some bottlenecks where you cannot put 3 things at the same time simultaneously on the project. So in my opinion, this is not realistic.
It's a great point that you're mentioning, because if you think about the juggling effect. So in fact, let us just do this. Move this back again.
Klaus in the chat has also was also itching in the fingers. Thanks, Klaus. Yes, he also said team 1 is multitasking, so they will never achieve the same throughput as team 2. Same thing that Ramon said there just now.
Okay, so let's just be clear in terms of the words we're using. So scenario 1 and scenario 2, I'm assuming that that's what class means, because it's just one team. Okay, so in this phase, so when we're multitasking, and to just belabor that point a little bit, if this team is planning 3 projects at the same time, it's obviously not neatly done like 10 days, 10 days, 10 days, because then context switching might be less of an issue. It's probably done in parallel. You do a few hours here, a few hours there, a few hours there. And then we have to consider that you have so many balls in the air. I mean, 3 from a project point of view, that already is a lot. So now you have to introduce quite a lot of mechanisms in order to synchronize different people, different activities. And of course, you forget, you go from one to the other one and you have to backtrack again, you make mistakes. So the consequences of this multitasking are just not considered in the simulation at all. But in reality, it is. So this is not reality by a long shot. In reality, we would have expected the 3 projects actually to take a lot longer than the 10 months. Okay, so with that out of the way, Jan, you wanted to add something?
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe just to break it down in a little bit more detail. I mean, the way of working on multiple projects at the same time, apart from the reduced productivity and the delays in progress, I mean, obviously it increases mental fatigue and fragmented attention. And obviously if you've got a lot of tasks in the system, there's a lot of task overhead as well. So it's overall not good because it increases a lot of risk for error. So you're right when you say, that's not a clear reflection. You probably can add some more time. It's not a realistic time scale.
Yeah, the purpose of such a simulation is to try and help us to get to the essence of the particular problem. And then in this case, I mean, is it good to multitask? Yes or no? And then to try and think about all the other reasons why we feel forced to multitask, why we feel we have no option, and then still do it. So by necessity, a simulation like this is going to be overly simplistic.
But I think we've got here in the chat, we've got a nice chat going. But the thing that we've got here with what Volker says, or what Tamer said, first of all, said also, if we're looking for the WIP 1 execution, that's really too optimistic, because it normally we get delayed somewhere. So if the team gets stuck waiting for an external service stakeholder, and he would like to hear when to break the WIP at project level, and Volker adds there and says, but if the customer for project 4 adds more requirements, it would delay project 5 and 6, whereas in the first case, where we run parallel, this wouldn't be the case.
Okay, so perhaps Matthias, let us be a little bit more focused now on just getting through the next parts before we get to all the.
Perfect.
I think
we
that's
can
actually
get to that one, and I'll park that, because this one is definitely a very important one, because what Volker has is what people normally say. But if I run parallel, I'll get more done.
It's one of the big reasons why we don't do it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let's return to what Johan actually started out with. He made a good argument on the value that we are generating, and we find that discussion happens not often enough. So we talk about all these projects, and yes, we can get stuff done faster, but what does it actually mean? And in many instances, we have no clear concept of what that value is. So in the simulation, we started out by saying that the team cost per month is 15,000, and every single project that we complete is going to generate 20,000. Let's just quickly complete this, and then we're going to see some values on those charts. So in the scenario 1, we completed all the projects after, well, they were completed in month 10, right? So the first project completed in month 10, second project month 10, and the third one giving us a lead time for each project of 10. So 10 months. So let's just quickly understand these graphs before I'm putting up the second scenario, because it gets a little bit more busy as soon as I do that. So in this first one, we see the cost per team, and it's a line chart. So you have to interpolate. So the first month is 15,000. So obviously it doesn't go in a clear linear fashion, increase the cost, but every month it adds 15,000 for team costs. So after first month, we have accumulated 15,000 of cost. Second month, 30,000, 45, etc. And we see this line going up to 150 after 10 months. And then it doesn't increase because we've completed the project. So in this ideal world, actually the team disbanded or did something else. So our simulation actually stops them. But the value that this team generates from essentially from month 10, we have the full value of 3 projects. Every project contributed 20,000. So 20,000 times 3 is 60,000. So in month 10, that team would have, in that scenario 1 would have been 60,000, 120, 180,000, etc. So here on the right-hand side, we see the same thing again in terms of the cash outflow. So 15,000, 30, 45, etc. Until after month 9, we start having the income. So now it starts decreasing rapidly. Okay, all fine with that explanation? Johan?
Yes.
Okay, so let's add in the second scenario when we started. So project 4 was completed when? Still remember?
Month 4.
Month 4. And that one was month 7. And the last one, month 10. So let's think about what we are seeing here now. I'm not going to say anything, to just give you some time to process, and also for everybody in the audience to process a little bit. So what do you expected, Jan?
Yes, for sure.
He's been in our masterminds for too long, Mark.
So quickly take us through the thinking. So the green line is now adding. The scenario 2 has now been added. We have seen the previous ones, the orange and the baseline scenario, the cost. So quickly take us through the line.
So basically, obviously, the earnings after month 4 pays for the cost, the resources, and obviously you make a profit, which becomes a positive cash flow after month 4. And so for project 3 and for project 5 and 6, same thing. You invoice a lot quicker, which means you got less stress on your cash flow. And cash flow is king, and we know that. Rather than having all the work being done in an outflow where you only make a profit after 10 months and obviously you generate an income. So you're running basically at a negative cash flow for longer.
Very nicely explained. So from a cash flow point of view, the scenario 2 was sort of at break even around about month 7, between month 7 and month 8. Whereas the other one took a lot longer. But I think the one thing that really stands out from this graph, and I think this is very easy to miss. I mean, it's obvious if we do a project faster, we're getting some money in earlier. But there's one thing that stands out, and especially, I mean, we see that quite nicely when we see the graphs on the same on the same system shown at the same time. And this is that difference between the one scenario and the other scenario, that 180, I believe it's about 180,000. You can actually see that here. At 180,000, that is a permanent gain of the scenario 2 organization, because they accumulated those resources. So, and then that's why I said originally, it's either an increase in revenue every month or some sort of cost saving every month. So the sooner you get that, the sooner you get to the results. And this additional 180,000 that was made by the organization in scenario 2, scenario 1 can never get to. They've lost that opportunity. So there's a real opportunity cost to make sure that you get stuff done and get it invoiced. Because in many minds, and so we don't, especially when we are part of it, some sort of delivery framework or so, we lose sight of that. The faster we have something in the market, the faster we actually generate income, generate results from it. I want to add this third graph here at the bottom also. It's a very, very simple graph. It just looks at all the individual months, so the different scenarios that we have, and considers the risk that something major may happen to the organization and what's risk it would have on the projects. And if we look at, for example, month 7, we notice that in scenario 1, we have 3 projects in flight. Whereas in scenario 2, we have already completed 2. So if something major happens, let's say, hopefully never again, but let's say something like COVID comes along, and suddenly overnight, many of our plans are changed. Many of our strategic planning direction that we set, etc., all of that comes to nothing. We have to redo. Which organization is going to be better off? It's obvious.
The one with less liability.
The one that has less work in flight.
I think the one thing we always also say is that we are working, so we are getting stuff done. But whilst we're working, we're also spending 15,000 rand, $15,000, 15,000 euros, whatsoever, per month. And that is in flight. And if we are not finishing, then if we are stopping this project at 90%, we are losing all that money. Plus, we haven't made money with this where we were. Yes.
Okay, so when I now take a step back and I look at these numbers, it seems to me like obvious. We have to focus on minimizing the number of projects that we have in flight in an organization at any given point in time. And yet we don't do it, or many organizations don't do it, or struggle to do it. And I would like to use that last part of this session actually to talk about it. I mean, both of you have been in organizations, you're in your consulting organizations out there. I mean, you've seen many, many different scenarios. What are the reasons? And perhaps now we can also come back to what the audience is talking about, what Volker has brought up, all of these things. What are the reasons? Why is it so difficult actually to apply this at a higher level of organization? Why don't we just go out and limit the number of initiatives or projects that we have in flight? Because the results speak for themselves.
So what I've noticed, talking to a number of businesses, it really comes in from a top-down position, and it's actually a strategic and a sales problem within the businesses where you sell a lot and you expect that it needs to get started. But using an example of a company I work with, they make a widget and they ask a deposit. And once the deposit is paid, they make a part of the widget to get the money, to warrant the money. And then obviously it goes into the WIP. So the more they're selling, the more widgets goes into the system, and they're depending on the budget to float the company, because exactly the problem that we explained here is you're burning cash because you're running multiple projects. You need to get an income somewhere. But essentially by doing that, they're actually making the problem even worse, because every time they add a customer, the rest of the customers starts waiting longer because there's a new project in the line. So eventually it's going to get to a point where the customers are no longer waiting and they're just going to say, give me back my money, or they're going to say, well, okay, I've lost that, but I'm going to go somewhere else. So there's a long-term effect of taking this approach. When it's one or two and you maybe have a number of resources that can float it, it works. But the moment your business starts scaling, this collapses totally. And that's everybody's vision, and that's everybody's strategy to grow their business, is to scale their businesses. So there is a break point where multitasking really becomes, the hole in the hull of the Titanic.
Ramon, you've seen it the other way around in your side. I know you've gone from very much multitasking over the last years to really taking it down, and maybe especially you had with the R&D and being in the development of hardware, you had this shortage of all sorts of silicon and equipment and so on lately. So maybe you can give us a bit more out of your feeling, how that felt before and how you're feeling now.
Okay. Before implementing Kanban, it was difficult to discuss with our internal or external customer. Should we take a new project or not take a new project? Thanks to the visualization of Kanban, now with the management, it's clear that for the time being, we still be with too many projects in hands. And this is obvious to everybody because it's visualized. So our experience that we are still juggling too many projects because the project we have are lasting for more than 2 years when we are talking about a new design. So we are still suffering for what we put in previously. What Kanban changed, and then now is obvious, nobody's discussing about introducing a new project into the system. We are working on finishing project, still having too many balls to juggle together because of the legacy, but there is a clear understanding that is not possible, is not beneficial for the business to introduce more projects. This was the clear benefit of Kanban introduction. And two, if I may add something to answer the question came before by the audience or also by Mark, why people are not doing this? Why they are trying, always putting new project in? Because somebody needs to go to the customer and say, what am I thinking? Somebody must go to the customer and say, we are not taking your project now. And this requires, I have to say, very strong basement to communicate this way to the customer. I think that many people are accepting more project, because it's difficult to say to the customer, you must wait. We don't have the capacity now to do it.
That's a valid point. And I think Volker highlighted that in the questions as well, where the stakeholder demands progress, not really caring about the rest.
So if we're just thinking this through, so because a customer or a number of customers, in this case, then 3 different customers want to see progress, we are forced to tell everybody, yes, we have started. So because we are planning. And then the project comes into that sort of funny space where, yes, we're working on it, but it's very difficult to give real progress feedback to the customer. And the end result is that all these 3 projects that take 10 months. Whereas if we just would have, in that ideal scenario where we would have delayed this sort of telling customers 2 and 3 that, yes, we are starting. We might have accepted the project, but would have delayed telling them that we started working on it. They would not have any expectations. They would not bother us about, okay, what is the status, etc., which means the team can focus on the project that is currently in flight. And instead of that project being in flight also only being delivered after 10 months, it's actually being delivered after 4 months. So it's a lot faster, and there's business benefit to it. But because we feel the pressure, we have to start everything at the same time. Sort of the logic does not entirely make sense to me, because in a way, we allow ourselves to be driven by customer need for some sort of control, and actually we're making it worse for everybody. Except perhaps for that 3rd customer. So the green customer in that case, the green customer, that project is only starting after 2/3 of those 10 months, and it's completing at the same time that it would have completed if we would have started everything at the same time. So the green one perhaps would push a little bit out on a long burner, but also there would have been no expectation of that customer that we have started. Okay, back to Jan's argument, then we may fear that we will lose that customer. But won't we in any case lose a customer if we tell everybody that we're starting and we're taking forever?
It's the same thing. And that was probably the question I was thinking about when you were just talking, Mark, is what lead times do you communicate to a customer? If he says, I want to see progress, And this is a mistake I've seen many businesses make, is they go and work out the project on MS projects, and they work out the actual task effort, and they say, well, this project will take 2 months, and then they end up taking 10 months anyway, because they are running 10 other projects which they're all committed to, and they planned it, and all of them it's going to take 2 months, the plan. But because they're running all of them concurrently, obviously you end up with 10 months. So you should communicate the right date. You've communicated the wrong date to your customer to begin with, because it's a mathematical equation. If it's going to take 2 months and you've got 10 customers asking for a project, then you should take 2 times 10. You say 20 months from now, you'll have your product. If you want me to start now. The second part to that is you need to prioritize. You need to, as a business, decide how important is that customer to you. Where does it fit in between the rest of the 20? And that's where you schedule the project to happen for that customer. If it is your most important customer providing you your biggest income, then you'll slip him in front, and he'll get his project after 2 months, and the rest will come 2 months and 2 months and 2 months later. So there's a couple of things that needs to happen. It's not just a clear, okay, we got 20 projects or 10 projects and we'll finish them all at the same time. It's not going to happen. You need to prioritize based on your customer's importance, a strategic decision. And then secondly, is you need to communicate the right expectation, the right lead time, not lie to your customer, because that breaks a lot of relationships within businesses.
Volker, you're bringing up a very important point here at the moment. Volker wrote there and said, I agree to the advantages, but it only works if we consider all involved parties as one community. And whether we consider them or not, they are part of one system. And we need to think about that and really get it into our head that we haven't helped anybody. And even the last one, as you say, Mark, because we haven't even looked at things like multitasking. We haven't even looked at things like task switching. I mean, who hasn't had that you started something, then you were disrupted, you did something else, and you came back and said, but what did I do here? And you redo this whole thing. That happens if you've got many. Or the other question you had, Volker, if you say the client brings in something new, we are just accepting it, it makes it longer. If we all focus on the one, we'll very quickly find out that this is actually laying us and we're finding something else. Whereas if we've got three at the same time, we say, oh, you can wait, we'll go on with something else. And we're just snowballing this whole thing. So it is a huge thing, but yes, there's one big thing, and that's what Inga also brings up here at the moment, is the business is worried that by saying no to new business, there is no projects coming anymore. And that's this absolute fear, this primal fear. If I don't say to you, I'm going to start now, then you're not going to give me the business, even though I promised you 3 months and I'm going to do it in 10 months.
So the thinking is rather sign the contract now and pay the penalties later than potentially not get a customer, but never pay penalties. So I think we're starting to touch on one of the core reasons why we have this challenge. And that is that when we're doing Kanban in a team context, we generally have full control over the environment, at least what happens within the team. So we can't really control how much comes to the team, but within the team, we can control when we start doing something, how we work on this, etc. But as soon as we start doing projects, it's not that ideal, and there are dependencies. We have to wait on others. And I think if we just quickly try and visualize this, how something like that would look like, we would essentially start with, let's say, with intention of doing one thing at a time. So we start working on the yellow project. We start planning, but now we hit some sort of snag. And that snag may be because we're waiting for an internal other team who's not part of our project management organization, or perhaps even for an external supplier who we have no control over. And because I can't continue working on it, so now I start working on the next one. And quite probably we're going to hit some sort of other snag. So we're waiting, and then we go the next one. Because we have it so deeply ingrained in us that we have to work 100% of the time. That's true efficiency. So now we start doing more and more because there are legitimate reasons. I mean, obviously we can't We can't wait forever. I mean, sometimes there are real delays, especially, Ramon, in your case, you're doing product development, which means there are hardware suppliers out there that could take months in order to supply something. Of course, you're not going to sit idle until the supplier comes back. But now you start something new, and the same happens, and start something new. And at some stage, you have so many things in flight. This is now where the challenge comes in, because if any one of those actually returns sooner with an answer, now you're not waiting for externals anymore. They're actually waiting for you. And now you add delays. So we're starting out by waiting for others. Now we want to keep busy, but because we keep busy 100% of the time, it means whenever that external supplier or other team or so has done their work and they release it and they get back to you, you don't have time because you're currently working on something else and you don't want to context switch, which means you won't just drop what you're currently doing and head back to your first project. You actually first complete something. And in my mind, this is why often we have so many balls in the air, because we feel like we have to be 100% working. No delays. I mean, every little bit of time that I have, I'd rather start something new because I need to get a head start. And I'm just wondering how much of the problem is caused by this, let's say, faulty assumption. We have to be working all the time. Because that's obviously is not the goal. The goal is not to be 100% efficient. The goal is to get stuff done. Just wondering whether that resonates in any way.
Yeah, that is a bit of an awkward mindset that needs to happen within a business, because obviously if you have resources, you want to see those resources busy. And that is a culture that's generated within the businesses. You know, I don't want to see you sit around, you know, and that creates the behavior where people are either pretending to be busy or they are actually taking on more than what they should, which is just piling it on someone else's table and making the problem slightly bigger or even massively bigger. I mean, obviously, by focusing on a single process flow, and I think it was Susan or Sven, I'm not sure who mentioned it in the questions, that you should have the whole business on there. I mean, essentially, the whole business is part of the value chain. There's the sales, there's the planning, there's the execution, there's the QC, and then there's the delivery, the guys who give it to and everyone's part of the same. Not the one can do anything without the other one. So if you are overloading the system or blocking the system by putting too much in an area that can't produce at a certain flow rate, you're only going to make the problem bigger. So it's always difficult to get the whole business sort of on there at one time. We've seen this out of experience, Mark and Matthias. Not the whole business buys in. So you really got to start in areas that's under control and get visibility and metrics around that so that you can start seeing what you can improve to the maximum in that area and then start advocating and obviously lead by example, show the other people it works. But only once you get that at a project level where you can plan a project and all the stakeholders on that project is using the same methodology and everyone's monitoring the same metrics, that's when it really becomes a game changer within the environment. It gives you new insights. It shows you where to scale if you need to scale, because many times people, and I've seen it many times, there's at least an 80% chance they got the idea wrong on where they should add resources. The problem is probably somewhere else, but they haven't got a mathematical method to actually pinpoint that and obviously identify the true area where the problem lies. We've seen this many times. So they fix something, but they fix the wrong thing.
I agree with almost everything you said, but there's one thing where I would actually like to counter a little bit, and that is where you said that the entire organization, everybody has to be doing the same, on the same boat, essentially. And I would disagree with that in the context of it's unrealistic. So because it's unrealistic, we're never going to get there, which means we don't even need to start. And I see that behavior often in organizations where I only have control here, but there are so many other moving parts around me, so I can't do anything. And I think that the danger there is to just say, okay, well, I can't do anything, instead of saying, well, in my team's context, I can make sure that I don't overload my team. So if everybody else wants to work at 100% capacity all the time, That's fine, they can do so, but I know what my true capacity is, and I'm not going to let it get out of hand. So in this case, the project, so granted, a team may not be able to work just on one thing, especially if it's a more complex team with external dependencies. But what is a realistic number of items the team can reliably work on to not endanger the due dates? And I think in many instances, it's a lot lower than what the team or organization thinks it is. And trying to fine tune what that is, what every team does, that gives an opportunity to get some value at the team level, and then start pushing back and start incorporating more and more of the other role players, because essentially they're all service providers. And the more service providers actually get on board, they know how to properly deliver services, the better the whole system will get. But it can start with single teams who start realizing, I should not overload.
I think there's been quite a bit of discussion also in the chat here, and there is things like that is definitely being said. Susanna specifically looked at generally there's a lack of discipline and triage. I mean, Susanna, you are now using quite a bit of big words, but should we do it now? Should we do it later? Should we do it never? Or Liesel said it could be that companies do not take enough time to calculate the business value that the project will realize, and that's the monetary or other value. And so it's difficult to explain why we should finish a project before starting the next. Projects are prioritized based on who the customer is and not the metrics. That is what often happens. So, and what Sven then added is saying it's even worse if it's an internal customer.
Yeah, where you have no direct connection to money gained, yes. Often. Money saved. Yeah, I think that is a real challenge. The sort of we're all operating within our own silos, and every single part of the business has their own sort of agenda, somehow magically linked to the strategy of the organization. But still, each of those units behave as if the capacity of the organization was infinite. And it's just them and their projects, not realizing that there's so many other parts of the business who also have demands. And this is then where that challenge of how do I prioritize across all of these different demands in the organization.
But I want to pick up one more thing that Ingo said earlier on, is this absolute fear of saying no and rather starting. And we always say, if you start with this, especially at the beginning, because now you're saying no to something and you still don't deliver yet. At the beginning of implementing something like this, there's a lot of weight on the managers that have to say no and have to back the team to say no, because by the time we are at the end of this, it becomes obvious, because the first project has already made money. So we start making money. Now it starts becoming obvious why we're doing this. But at the beginning, to say this, it's absolutely no, we can't do this. Whereas if we're saying, look here, there is a lead time of this, we can start and we are full, we can start in 3 months' time, but then we can promise you with an 85% probability that we finish in 3 months. Whereas now we're saying, okay, well, this is 3 months of work, but we've got lots of work in the system. And if somebody asks how long will it take, it's how long is a piece of string.
So a word on internal customers and projects. I mean, and I think this is probably what you're also touching on, and we've done this exercise at one of our customers, and it turned out to be actually quite efficient. I mean, there's a lot of project requests in a specific business unit, and each one of the requests sits in some other department, and obviously for them it's important. But they haven't looked at it holistically and in terms of what are the other projects within the pipeline of that business unit, and how does that align in terms of importance and value to the overall business. So the exercise that we did there was to visualize all the open projects and who they belong to, and get those stakeholders around a single table and play poker, essentially, where we said, well, you've asked for this and that person's asked for that, and you're all competing for the same resources. Which one is more important for the business? And they amongst themselves eventually agreed, okay, no, mine can wait. This one's no longer important. Or you know what, we are doing duplicate things. I've requested exactly the same thing. And just by doing that exercise, we cleaned out over 100 requests, project requests, out of the pipeline. So I think communication and visibility in terms of projects internally specifically is very important to translate it back to business value and let the business agree, you know, which one is more important than the other. Then you don't end up with that silo behavior.
And the first step is always to visualize it all.
Awesome. I think I'm already looking at the time, and we've got a full 3 minutes left. So I don't know. I want to give the panelists, especially Johan and Ramon, just quick one. Is there any one thing that if there's anything you want the people to remember out of today, what would that be?
Well, I think you got to start. Don't wait, you know, if you're waiting for business. Start wherever you are, even if it's just at your own team level, and start with the basics. Step one, like Mark just mentioned. Visualize it so that you can just get a situational awareness of what's happening and then communicate that back to the business so that you can get that awareness going, because people don't know what they don't know. Many people think everything's okay. And just because they don't know, they're making big mistakes.
Awesome. Ramon, anything from your side specifically?
Yes. My thinking is that by the simple thing, visualizing the activity you are doing, you will change the level you are having when you are communicating internally or externally about your capacity. You change from an emotional level to a fact-based discussion. Without visualizing, you always feel guilty not delivering enough. When you start visualizing, you can discuss with your internal stakeholder or the customer differently and telling them, I cannot do it because I'm doing this fact-based. I can only do in 3 months when I finish this. So you really change with Kanban, with the power of visualization, the level of communication from emotional to fact-based.
Mark, I don't know if you want to add something.
Oh, it's an ongoing discussion.
Hmm.
I think there are no clear answers. One of the elements that we haven't really spoken about, which I think complements very nicely what Johan and Ramon are saying, is that yes, visualization is incredibly important. I mean, when you start seeing where all the projects are, how many there are, you have something to work with. But that is not enough. You need to have some sort of improvement mechanism in the organization and leadership that says, this is not good enough, I want to change it. And perhaps this is really, I think, the biggest message to everybody, that there are many people working in the organization, but there are not that many people who actually then take the first step and do something about it. And I just wish that we had more people actually that take that opportunity and say, yes, I know I'm working currently in my silo, and this is what I'm measured on. But if I don't start looking across the silo borders into the other areas of the business and start getting my colleagues together in order to try a more systemic problem like this project management, we're never going to get anywhere. And yeah, I think many on this call are these type of people. So I wish you all the best with that.
Yeah. And I think that the big thing is we're talking visualization, and the second step, the second big practice is WIP limits. And we said that on project level. And hopefully we've given you today a bit of a thinking about what this WIP limit means, and that on project level, you can actually already bring in quite a bit, and you can alleviate quite a lot of stress on a system if you bring it in on that level. But I think that's all we've got time for today. One thing I want to just leave with you, we will have a feedback form. I'll also quickly put a link into the chat, but also we will probably, when you're closing it, you will see that feedback form, and we will be asking you a few questions. We want to have your help, that you give us, that you tell us what you want to hear about for our next sessions and so on. But also, if you are interested, if that what we said today interested you, we do provide team Kanban simulations, multi-project simulation. This is now a very, very easy one. We run often 4-hour simulation, and we are also busy developing an even more complex simulation where we cover many of the challenges the project leaders face today on multiple levels. And with the review, you can also request a 50% discount voucher to attend any of these simulations. So that is our thank you to you if you fill in the form for us. I think that's it from us. Many thanks, and maybe we'll see some of you on Thursday as well. But a big, big, big thanks, especially to Johan and Ramon. We're working together for quite a while. They're part of our mastermind groups that meet every 2 weeks. Johan for quite a few years already. Ramon, it's also about 2 or 3 years now already. 2 years, okay. Johan, I think we last said it was 6, so it is quite a while. Thanks again to you. It was awesome.
Pleasure.
Pleasure to me.
Thank you to everybody, and have a good evening.
Great. Bye then.